Well, welcome back, listeners. This is the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe podcast, a podcast about enjoying your hobby. We're glad to have you back with us. As a reminder, we are part of the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe network, which will soon be offering a lot of different events and other content to help grow our community, which is our main objective as a gamers group. So, again, welcome back. We're so excited to have you here. I am one of your hosts, Ricky.
And I'm your other host, Matt. And right before we get into the meat of our podcast here today, we do have one announcement for you. Gamers of the Eastern Fringe is going to be hosting a Summer 40K League starting this June. It's going to last for 2 months. So that'll be the first of our leagues. We're planning on running several more throughout the year, so keep your eyes on the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe socials, whether it be Facebook, Discord, or YouTube, and we'll make sure to get you all the info that we have on that just as soon as we can. We're actually going to hear more about that event later in the podcast during an interview that I had with Robby Vega.
Awesome, Matt. Well, as always, we like to start off with a little check-in with each other and hobby progress, something we encourage you all to do because we're ever fighting that battle against the gray, against our piles of shame to get things more on the table the way we want them. After all, it's about enjoying the hobby, and some of that involves some painting, converting, and, of course, playing. Matt, how you doing with your hobby?
I haven't made too much progress since the last time we convened here. I got a couple of Score Pack Destroyers put together for my Necrons, 4 out of the 9 that I currently own. And I got an email from Games Workshop customer service that they're resending me a Commander Farsight that I ordered way before that codex came out because the one they sent me was missing half of the model. So that'll be arriving sometime next Wednesday.
Wow, I mean, I know the warp can eat things, but I didn't realize they would eat half of a model but send the other half?
Yeah, I popped the box open, and his entire torso was missing from the box.
Wow. Well, at least you got half of a torso for some neat converting or terrain. That'll be cool.
Yes, definitely. What about yourself? What do you got going on?
Very similarly, for all our listeners that may not have heard our opening episode 1, our pilot. Again, I'm also, a parent of two small kids. One is just a couple months old, so unfortunately have not been cranking through things in the wee hours in the morning. But the progress I have been making, I'm painting up some of my brother's breacher squads. He plays Tau. We'll be hearing about him later in the episode and the list he submitted to us. So painting up some of his breachers. I'm sure they will blast me off the table in good order. So thankful that I painted them. But on my orc side, the things I like to play, doing some building and converting of some warbikers. I'm currently trying to build up a Speed Freak Army of Renowned. The one thing I do like about our current rendition of our Orcs Codex is that we have multiple builds, and so I'm really excited to try and play that Speed Freaks list because the bikes become OBSEC, and I'm just kind of working through a couple different plans and grand strategies of how I can get these things that can move 20 inches before any stratagems are used and kind of steal objectives, and then because of their standardized rules are able then to shoot, which they're DACA weapons. They do a lot of fun stuff. So just really excited to try that version of an orc list versus what I generally like to play, which is a much more mixed kind of mechanized infantry with support list. So real excited for that. So unfortunately not a lot, but enough that I'm still enjoying it when I do get to it.
All right. I really like those the orc bike models. They're some of my favorites in the line, but I think your mechanized list, does that have def dreads and stuff? Those are definitely my favorite, hands down.
Oh, they 100% have. I mean, I got crazy and made a list that was entirely def dreads and killicans, and I love those little chicken walkers. They just make my heart happy. So yeah, definitely one of these days, Matt, I will have a match against you, and I'll field nothing but 9 def dreads and every bit of killicans I can fit into the list, and we'll have a good day.
Sounds like an absolute slugfest.
Well, all right. Well, folks, the next segment we have for you, of course, is some hobby tips. One of the things we want to talk about each and every time is how to keep the hobby fun, since that's kind of all we're about here. So Matt has some stuff he wants to share as we break out of winter and kind of get out of this rut of these beautiful temperatures we have here in eastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're anything like me, the winter months and hobbying do not go well together. The gray, dreary weather and the cold do not mix with rattle cans. And as a result, I haven't put paint down on a model since I believe October of 2021. It has been a long time since I've got a mini painted. So I've just got a couple tips here, some of my personal picks for things that we can do to kind of get ourselves back into the cycle of getting our minis painted up. Now that you've got good weather, my favorite thing to do, especially the first time I get stuff primed right out of the gate, pick the first warm day that you have and prime as many of your models as you possibly can. Whatever color primer you're using. For me, it's that classic, that Chaos Black rattle can, and I'm going to take that outside and spray as many of my models as I possibly can, so that in the event that it starts to get cold again, which out here in State College at least, it has been playing some pranks on us up in the 60s back down to the 20s. I have some stuff to paint in the event that I go through whatever project I'm currently working on. So having a big section of primed minis kind of really helps keep your projects fresh. I know personally batch painting 30 Necron Warriors can get a little tedious, so breaking those 30 Necron Warriors up with 3 Scorpec Destroyers in between every 10 kind of helps keep the hobby fresh, keeps my brain a little bit active, changing up what I'm working on.
I'm with you, Matt. I'm with you. Trust me, batch painting Orc Boys, because I compulsively can't leave out all those details on the model. So yeah, after about 10 or 20 of those things, I'm like, I got to paint something else. I got to paint something with big armor panels. So I'm with you.
I got 60 Necron Warriors to do, and I am not looking forward to it in the slightest.
Good gracious.
By the same token, maybe not even within the same faction, but let's say you've got multiple factions available to you to be working on. I know some people don't benefit from that as many as other people, but if you're a model hoarder like me, you have a bunch of unpainted models from a bunch of different factions, so you can break up your 20-man Necron Warrior squad with a 10-man squad of Fire Warriors that are a completely different color, and again, that'll help kind of keep the creative juices flowing, maybe give your eyes a break from staring at all that silver.
Oh, agreed. I mean, yeah, just changing up what colors you paint or what effects you're trying to do is always fun. Especially if there's like things that are much easier to paint. If it's a bunch of skin tones that you can prime it the main color, wash it, dry brush it, and call it good. There's a nice feeling that comes with that.
Oh, definitely. Another tip that I actually didn't put this one in our show notes today, but I just thought of it for myself, is don't be afraid to step back a little bit from those more difficult techniques that you might have been working with before the winter. I had finally gotten the hang of painting some pinstripes last year. Got a couple models ready to go this year, lined up my pinstripes, and they were not straight at all. So my brush hands are super out of practice. So it's okay to take a step back from those and kind of get yourself back into the swing of things. Don't be afraid to practice on your empty sprues or, a spare model that you've got here and there. I know as a Tau player, we have gun drones by the dozen that we're able to kind of practice those little techniques on. So before you go and try to paint some pinstripes on your big $120 Riptide, maybe it's okay to paint pinstripes on a gun drone first, just to make sure.
That sounds like a solid plan, and likewise, very similarly, when I get kind of stuck and I just need to feel that little boost of getting something achieved, do something you know how to crank out, and just enjoy that feeling of, hey, I got this done because I know how to do some cool metal effects and add that to my piece. So definitely, as Matt was saying, change things up when you need to, do all that good stuff, get yourself out of the rut however you got to do it, because as soon as you're back into painting stuff and feeling that level of achievement, you're going to want to do more and keep it rolling, which is, now's a great time. As much as our beloved weather here in Eastern PA likes to not be sure of itself day to day, it could be 60 one day and 25 the next. Well, take it as it comes, and as Matt already said, just have a backlog of prime stuff so you don't have to rely on a week that's not sure what it wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt there. Lastly, I want to say it's okay to stand up and take a break from your hobby station. As much as you might be feeling like me and you haven't put paint on a model since October and you're finally getting to do it again, you're going to spend hours at that desk with your spine curled into a not leaned over model 2 inches from your face. It's okay to stand up, walk away, make sure you're getting yourself food, make sure you're staying hydrated. I know if you're anything like me, once you finally get stuck in, you can sit there for hours and hours and hours. You don't know where your day went, and all of a sudden it's nighttime and you haven't had a bite to eat or a drop of water all day and you're feeling rough. So make sure you get yourself up out of that desk chair, take a stroll around your space, and make sure that you're giving yourself a break.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. As I sit here recording the podcast with Matt, I'm staring at my big, reusable, water cup right here that just gets filled up, as soon as it gets to about the halfway point, just back in, because you got to stay hydrated, folks. It'll keep you sharper in every aspect of your life. It's not just a matter of being sharper at the good old hobby desk, but definitely stay hydrated. Make sure you get some good nutrition, even if that means leaving some snacks in the hobby drawer. So you're reaching for a new brush. Oh, there's some trail mix. There's some nuts. There's some beef jerky. Just have something there. Nibble on it. It'll keep you sharp. It'll help out, and that way we're all not getting up feeling lightheaded from our desks.
And that'll also kind of help you keep yourself safe from the burnout that you might experience. I don't want to keep harping on 60 Necron Warriors, but if I sat down today and I painted 60 Necron Warriors, I'm not going to want to pick my paintbrush up for another month. So, it's important to you get yourself back from that rut and you're ready to go and you think, all right, finally, gonna get all these projects taken care of. This whole 2,000 point army that I've been saving up all winter long, I can finally get it painted out. And you're gonna paint the whole thing in 2 days and you're gonna hate the army because you just spent 2 days painting it. So, don't, as much as you're happy to be getting back into your hobby finally after the gray and the dreary, it's important to not dive in too hard, because then you might just burn yourself out again and you're left with a pile of shame that you were ready to tackle maybe 2 days ago, but now you are stuck with a cramp in your wrist from holding that paintbrush and your back is tight and your eyes hurt.
Oh, exactly. And again, do that good self-care, everybody. Please, if you're going to do a marathon painting session, and I know we've kind of all been there. I've been there where you got an event coming up and you got to get it done. I've done that the last 2 tournaments I've been in. I've been up to at least, 1, 2 a.m. finishing something up. And, you want to make sure you take care of yourself, whether that's, okay, let me shake the hands out, do a little massage on the hands, make sure you're getting all those knots out. So when you're there rolling the dice, you're not dropping that precious model that you spent, 20 hours doing. Make sure you do some of that. You'll feel better. You'll get yourself out of the rut that you may just fall in again because, oh, I painted 60 Necron Warriors. That's great. But now I'm wrecked from doing that. So, give yourself that time and do take care of yourselves, listeners.
Absolutely. That's all I've got for getting out of that hobby rut. Ricky, I'm not sure if you have any personal tips to kind of break out of that, or if you managed to survive the winter rut and had a backlog ready to go before it started.
No, much like you, I was going to say that's something I definitely thought of as I was in the thick of winter was, I tried to rattle can prime some things out on some of the, warm, in quotes, and I know you can't see it because this is a audio media, but warm in quotes days when it was like 30 and it did not turn out so hot. So those are getting redone after being stripped of their primer. But definitely, for those of us that don't have like an airbrush studio where you can prime all year round because it's just the room temperature of your home, of your space. But definitely agree with everything you've said, Matt. That's kind of what I'm thinking I will be doing heading into next winter is just, cleaning off sprue lines left, right, and center heading into October, November, priming every loving thing I think I'll dream of touching, and then putting them all back so they can, when I'm feeling in the mood to paint some orc boys, they're there. If I feel like painting some Necrons or some of my brother's Tau stuff, they're all there, ready to go. The only other thing I would encourage, again, is just do something. If you're in a rut, if you have some small achievement, you'll be more, you'll have more energy, more drive to go back at it again. It reminds me of the sage advice from some of our, uh, brave men and women in the armed services. They're all, kind of trained to get up and make their bunk because the notion is if you start the day achieving something, you're going to continue in the same fashion. So, you know, finish something, finish a project, and then look at it and say, I want to have another model next to that in my display case. I want another thing to join this unit, and you're going to feel good about it. So just do what you can, put in the time that you can, even if it's just a little bit. Again, speaking as a parent, two small kids, there's not a lot of hobby time, so it just means I'm being extra efficient in everything I do so that I can also join you all and having something to report, each time we come in for a hobby check-in.
All right, absolutely. And again, we're really thankful for the warm weather here coming up, getting those hobby tips started again. Ricky, you wanted to talk about something that you have coined as Garage Hammer.
Indeed, it actually ties in well to your comment about the warm weather. So, uh, to me, we're entering into this nice little zone right now where it's not too hot and it's not too cold. I mean, we're Pennsylvania, so it can become a cold day, even though it's spring. It can get real cold, or it can get blazing hot like summer. Mother Nature's having a real fun time right now. Basically, the simple idea is with Garage Hammer, it's not exclusive to a garage, so you don't need to tune out and turn off the podcast just because you're like, oh, I don't have a garage, I'm not listening to him. But it's anything. Whether you have a garage, you have a little pop-up tent to give yourself some shade on a nice area of decking or concrete. Whether you have a shed or just in your basement, it's really not exclusive to an area. The whole concept of keeping your hobby fun with this Garage Hammer plug is just have something, have some friends over, roll some dice. You can invite just one buddy and have a little match between yourselves. But I'm going to encourage you, as we get into spring, have a couple friends over that play the game. Have them bring one army, multiple armies, make a day of it. Get out there, you know, have a cooler, as Matt was saying about hydration and making sure we have enough food, nourishment, and all that. Like, have a cooler and filled with beverages of your choice. Whether that's beer, whether that's wine coolers, whether that's yoo-hoo drinks. I mean, whatever suits your fancy, guys. There is no judgment here. But have something. Keep the drinks flowing. Keep yourselves hydrated. Cook up some food, or order out. Whatever you need to do. Just make sure there's food aplenty that you can pick up, munch on, get back to rolling the dice. But really, just have fun. Um, you know, have those games. Have a couple games lined up. So if it's a group of four of you, make sure everybody gets a chance to play a game together. So that way, you're not facing like my brother plays Tau and has played Tau since he started his 40K adventure a couple editions ago, and I know the ins and outs of what he's going to do as a player and what he likes to do with his army. That's not nearly as fun as like the upcoming game I'll have against Matt one of these days, where I don't know how he plays. He could be a traditional, you know, Tau Drukari player, or he could play the most anti-meta, jank list I've ever seen, and I'll never be able to pin him down. I don't know. That's half the fun in going into that match. And likewise, he doesn't know how reckless or in the box I'll be as an orc player. I will say I tend to be more on the cunning but brutal side of things versus the brutal but cunning. That's as much as I'll give him as a tip, though.
I really would have pinned you as a brutal but cunning type, so I'm already
that's the whole idea.
already
That's
on
the
the back foot.
But yeah, so again, just get together, friends. Get together and enjoy something. It doesn't need to be grand. You don't have to say, okay, I have to get 10 of us together, otherwise it's not worth it. But just do it. The other thing I would encourage, again, as you've heard a couple times already in this podcast alone, I'm a family man, and so if I'm gonna have my brother over, a couple friends from this gamers group, I'm going to absolutely make sure there's something for them. Whether that's making sure we have some pizzas available for people to munch on, extra burgers and dogs that have been cooked up and can be reheated at a moment's notice. Even just having stuff out in the yard. So setting up some cornhole or corn sack. It goes by a million names. But some beanbag toss game for anybody to play, so that my 4-year-old can throw a beanbag and enjoy it, or my adult friends can get out there and toss it too. The whole point though is have something for them, so that way they can play. So it's a whole event for everybody. It's not just family; it's whoever you're having over, whoever your loved ones are. Let them have something fun and enjoyable to do while you roll those dice and have a good time too. So that's the main thing I would encourage you, is kind of break out of this rut coming out of the winter by having some games, and you host it. And if you don't have an abundance of terrain to make engaging, tables and terrain, well, grab some cereal boxes, cut out some windows. Um, it may look, it may look a little different compared to, awesomely painted GW terrain or 3D printed stuff, but if it works, it works. And as soon as you start rolling dice and having fun with your friends, you're not going to care that you're staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup breakfast cereal box. You're going to be like, hey, that's a building, and I got to get beyond it to get my buddy. So again, friends, just really get out there, have an event at your house, have an event in your apartment, wherever you are. Just do something fun. If gaming is not your thing, I realize everything I just said is very gaming focused, and that may not be your enjoyment in this hobby. Do the reverse. Do a hobby day. If you and your friends are more hobbyist, and what you get out of this is the enjoyment of painting and building and converting, have a hobby night. Have a night over. Bring everybody over. Put on some good tunes. Make sure there's plenty of clean water for your paint cups, and just go to town and talk the whole while, and let it be a good time. So you can hear kind of the consistent thing in this is just have fun. Don't hold yourself up saying, okay, the next time I have an event that I'm going to is in 4 months. Do your own thing. Do something fun. Let's get together, because now we have some sweet weather for this, semi outdoor games or hobbying, where you can get together with folks and really, really enjoy it. But Matt, anything on your end? I imagine you've gotten together with some folks and played some games. Any thoughts on anything I said?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's really important to kind of get together with the people that you like to play with, and make sure that you're getting those games in. Because, the winter weather doesn't always allow for that. So your paint drought might look a lot like a gaming drought as well. We're fortunate enough now to be in a time where it's both getting warmer, and from what we can tell, COVID is kind of getting a little better. So it might be okay to go kind of have those games that a couple months back you would have been hesitant to have. Things are starting to look up, so definitely keep your mental health and your happiness as your number one priority, and get those games in.
Absolutely, Matt. Great point, especially with relating to COVID. And again, I've been to two tournaments recently. Just and there's still folks with masks, and I was one of them. Again, with young ones that are in no way able to be vaccinated for a little while longer. You can still play in a mask, and you can still have fun. A funny thing, a piece of fabric doesn't stop you from having fun on your face. You can still have a grand old time. I think any of us that have been following competitive 40K have been seeing that some events still require masking, and they're still having a ball. They're still having memorable matches that we can either watch on stream or read write-ups about. So do what you got to do, folks, to have some fun. It's a great time to do it right now. Speaking of events, one of the things we also are going to cover in our next segment is some local events. Again, we are centered in Eastern Pennsylvania, specifically kind of in the Allentown area, but Matt's out there holding the far western fringe of our group there in State College. But Matt, would you mind taking us through some of our local events? What do we got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. We did have a few this past weekend, a week or so back as well. This past weekend Warhammer Allentown had another one of their doubles tournaments. They've had a big spike in event frequency over there, I guess is the best way to say that. So you can definitely keep your eyes on Warhammer Allentown for a place to be having those weekend events. It looks like the event that they hosted last weekend was a 500-point doubles event, and to my knowledge, the store was at capacity for that event. So 8 teams of 2 players. It seems like it was pretty shoulder to shoulder in there, but everyone definitely had a good time. Lots of good dice roll in there. A super good turnout for Kevin over there at Warhammer Allentown. We saw some chatter in the Discord about an Age of Sigmar tournament over at the Portal. The last that I had heard, there were about 9 players there, so the community is definitely still starting to bubble up and grow. We'd love to see a couple more players out there. I know I personally haven't broken down the barrier into Age of Sigmar quite yet, but you better believe that the second I get my hands on an army, I'm going to be trying to turn up to one of those, and I totally lost my train of thought there. I knew exactly what I was going to say. Skin my teeth, I guess.
Oh, you're talking about getting yourself into Age of Sigmar and getting a chance to play, huh?
Yes, definitely. Totally lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. That's why you have a co-host to help you out. Yeah, as Matt was saying, that event saw about 9 players. We didn't get a true and proper head count for that event, but the Portal really has been our local area championing the Age of Sigmar scene in our area, whether it's just open gaming nights or these kind of monthly tournaments they've been running. So if that is your scene, if AOS is your jam, the Portal in Bethlehem is probably a good spot for you. And by the way, if you're out of the area and listening to us and wondering, what are they talking about? What is Warhammer Allentown? What is the Portal? These are some of our local gaming stores. Obviously, the Warhammer Allentown is an official, GW store. The Portal is one of our independent ones in Bethlehem that have, of course, a variety of, products from, trading card games, comics, and, of course, lots of space in the back for events. And they've been very open, including through the pandemic, to work with us as a gaming community so that we could still have something, albeit in a safe way. So they are continuing to be a place where we are able to find good people to play with, regardless of where you happen to be geographically located.
Absolutely. Thanks for the save, Ricky. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Tomorrow, April 9th, there is a doubles tournament at the Adventures Academy in York, PA, from 10 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. I know that's a little bit of a hike for some of us in the Easton, Allentown, Bethlehem area, but if you're willing to make that trip with one of your buddies, be ready to roll the dice and throw down. And also, a few weekends back, there was a 40K tournament at Palladium. Our very own Robby Vega, was in attendance with his Fish of Fury list. I was lucky enough to be able to sit down and talk with him about his experience there. We got to discuss his list and kind of talk about how his matches went, who his opponents were, and how he thought the scene out there went. So I'm going to cut to that interview with him now, and we'll get to hear all about his experiences there. How's it going, everybody? I am sitting down with my good friend and co-creator here at Gamers of the Eastern Fringe, Robby Vega, and we're going to be talking about his time at Palladium a few weekends ago and his experience there. How you doing today, Robby?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Matt?
Oh, just peachy. So, my first question for you today is, how was the experience overall? How would you rate it?
Well, playing at Palladium, it's not the first time I've gone there. I've been in tournaments there in the past. It's always a great time. It's a semi-competitive group, so you tend to play a lot of, I would say that some of the top players in the area, or at least very competitive and very good players, and then a couple newer people trying to get in, which is kind of the mix that we had this time. It was the weekend of Adepticons, so not all of the normal players that I've seen in the past were there, but it was still a pretty competitive group.
Sure. Was it how big is that event? Usually, I actually haven't heard too much about Palladium. Was it a large? Like, how many players would you say about?
They had 13 players. I think that's about its usual. I read somewhere that last month they had like 21 or something like that, and they said that that was their record. So, but it's usually a pretty good showing for the couple of times that I've been there. It has been a little while though.
Sure. All right. And what were your personal expectations for yourself going to this event? Were you hoping for a clean 3-0, just trying to test out your list, or was it something completely different entirely?
Something completely different entirely. I consider myself a competitive player, but knowing what it takes to be a really competitive player to actually compete in these tournaments, you have to be in tournament shape. And I am not. So the last tournament I played in was SoCal in October. So that was a 6 game super major in Southern California. It was in Del Mar. And that was a whole lot of fun. I brought Chaos Demons at the time. Now, this tournament being the first since then, that was, gosh, October. So that was 5 or 6 months ago. I have not played more than 1 game in a day since then. So I was a little out of shape. So my goal was to test out my Tau list. I played a couple test games ahead of time, see if it works, see what doesn't work, and just kind of get back into tournament playing shape.
Sure. All right. You mentioned your list, so let's talk about that. What were your kind of general tactics going in? I know you called it your Fish of Fury list, but let's talk about why you chose the units that you did and why you chose to leave some others at home.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I tend to like to build towards the meta or build a skewed list that is more fun to play. I try to keep an eye on what competitive players are playing and take some of their ideas, but put my own spin on it. Um, and this was a good chance to do that. I think early on when the Tau Codex came in, people immediately jumped to the crisis suits, which are really strong, broadsides, things like that. And I think that those are fair builds, especially leaning towards um, Farsight Enclaves as a SEP choice. I think that is the right choice competitively. But once again, I kind of want to build something that really felt unique to the Codex, that felt more like me. I've been playing Tau since 5th edition, and I've really grew up playing with Devilfish and Fire Warriors. And so that's what I wanted to do, since honestly they're really good. The rules are really catered towards them. Not saying it's the best built list, but it was good enough, I thought, to at least take to a tournament. So my choice of 5 Devilfish is actually a modification from my original list. I looked at 7 Devilfish and 2 Skyrays in my initial list, but it didn't have much else, to be honest with you. So through testing, I kept cutting back Devilfish, but not wanting to lose too many, because in my head, not everyone right now is building to destroy vehicles. Right now, they're building to destroy hordes. They're building to play the mission. They're building to do all sorts of things. So a T7 3+ save vehicle with 13 wounds each is a lot to deal with. Now, I came up with this list design before Harlequins and Eldar came out. I built it thinking what Eldar would be without knowing what it would be, but honestly, the Harlequins are a really strong counter to this list, and I found that out the hard way. But overall, kind of circle around to what you had asked. The idea behind the list is 5 transports that can all scout move turn 1, because I'm always choosing Monka. Tau Sept for the reroll to hit. Plus, I like the name characters. Even though I didn't bring any in this case, it really relies on the focus fire strat to get +1 to wound, so I can take down big targets pretty easily, even though I have a lot of 1 damage, strength 6 or strength 5 guns, and really play the mission extremely well. This list does not kill very well. It can put wounds on targets, but it really struggles with high vehicle or high monster lists. So I kind of want to reiterate that I built it knowing that. Now, the couple big hitters in my army include, I did bring a unit broadsides. That was a change I made recently to give me some punching power to start to counter the monsters from the Tyranid list and the vehicles from Eldar, and a Riptide, which is actually his sole job is to protect the commander. That was one of the things I found pretty early on in my test games, is that the commander, which was a high DACA, just volume fire, reroll hit, reroll wounds, character. That's it, just volume, and he's built for close combat too. So he could take down almost anything, but then he typically dies after that. So the Riptide gave him a chance to survive another day. But unfortunately, because of that switch, actually, unfortunately is not the right word, worked really well with this list is when I made that change, the broadsides, the Riptide, and the Commander were my 3 highest costed units. So it made To the Last an excellent secondary choice for this army. Now, granted, it's hard to keep those 3 things alive, but they are very tough to kill. So typically, if I was losing them, I already lost the game. And if I didn't lose them, that means I'm winning the game.
Oh, sure. You mentioned that you had a hard time with Harlequins. We're going to use that to pivot into talking about your matchups at Palladium. I know you had mentioned to me a few days ago that you ended up going 2-1. So I just want to talk about what were your 3 opponents and kind of how did your thought process go between each match when you found out who your next opponent was going to be?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Part of my record was really due a little bit to luck, and part of it was just experience. So I have not had a lot of history playing against Harlequins to begin with. I think I've played against them once since ever playing, to be honest with you. So even with all the buffs they got, just not playing an army, not knowing an army makes it extremely challenging to win. But on that note, my first 2 opponents, which all 3 opponents were great, they were great learning games for me as well. I took a lot out of it. 2 of them were armies I know very well. My first game was a mirror match against Tau, and I have their names in front of me. So that was James. That was a really fun game. We only got through a couple turns that game, unfortunately, because James was a newer player competitively, and so the game took a little bit longer than it normally would. But it was still a fun game. I was able to play really aggressive with all the Devilfish. It's exactly how my list wants to play. And I was basically able to dictate the entire game. He had 2 Riptides, 1 Heavy Burst Cannon, 1 Ion, that honestly I just ignored. I didn't even shoot at. But I was able to cause such a mess with everything else that I was able to score a lot of points fast. The game timed out. I think I still would have won if it went to 5 turns, but I do believe he still had a chance in the game. He still had his heavy hitters. Attrition was starting to hit me, but it wasn't catching up to me yet. So I would have liked to see that game play out to know for sure. But that's really why, like, when we talk about tips to playing competitively, it's about trying to play faster. And there are things I could have done to play a little bit faster too. But once again, this was meant to be also a tournament for me to kind of get up to speed, if you will. So it's a really good game. That game, the score ended 52-16. Having to the last helps a lot, especially in games that don't run to the end if everything survives. So that was 15 points there. So that was a pretty healthy score, but still kind of low for a win. Typically, a win should be between 60, and 90. I mean, you can always get 100. Don't get me wrong, but typically wins will be 60 to 90. So having a lower score meant that I actually scored the least amount of points for players who won. So because there was an odd number of players, that put me against the highest scoring loser for round 2. So that was a good game as well. Good learning game as well. That was with, sorry if I don't remember the names. If I don't have them in front of me, because it was a couple weeks ago, or it might have been last week. Time is flying by. That was with Nick, and I mentioned that knowing armies, knowing your opponent works really well. Nick played a very, I would say, a very fun Necron list. I felt that it was very strong. It's just Necrons are in a tough spot. He had Wraiths, he had the Destroyers, of course, he had the ones with the blades that are in the new kits. I don't know what they're called. And then he had a Tomb King. Or was it the Silent King? I keep confusing them with AOS.
The big one on
AOS. So the Silent King, which is honestly a bad matchup for me. But fortunately for me, I have just played a test game against my friend Mark, and he played Necrons. And I found out how much my army struggles killing Wraiths. Things that have a high invulnerable save, or anything that can limit my ability to hit and my ability to wound, causes me problems. So you see some foreshadowing here for the third game, which we'll talk a little bit. So 4-up invulns with high toughness, or is really tough for my army. So what I wound up doing to face that off is I basically kept feeding one transport, one devilfish into the wraith every turn, and kept hitting him from different angles to keep him from moving. So I basically kept that unit in the middle of the field the entire game. That worked really well. I lost a couple devilfish, giving up 2 points here, 2 points there for bring it down, which to me is no big deal because I killed almost everything else in this army. By the end of the game, it was just the Silent King, the Wraith, and what was it? I think one character was pretty much it. Otherwise, everything else I was able to shoot off the board because this list is very mobile, surprisingly mobile. So while that game it worked really well because I knew what to do in that game, if that makes sense. The final score is 85-39, and I was able to dictate the entire game. So that played the way I feel my list should play. That's where I got in trouble in my third game. So my third game was against Harlequins, and I just mentioned the tough things that really impact my list is anything that makes it harder for me to hit and wound. And wound includes a tough save, and that's where Harlequins are surprisingly efficient. -1 to hit, no rerolls to hit, and a lot of invuln saves all over the place. Pretty much shut down my offense ability, and my army does not have high offense, so it counts on +1 to hit from marker lights. It counts on reroll ones. It counts on quantity of shots, not quality of shots. So to take down vehicles for me with that happening was next to impossible. Meanwhile, his list was very good at killing vehicles. So he would kill a vehicle and kill everything inside of it, which meant I was losing too many resources to score to ever get out of essentially my castle. There are things that could have played better. I don't think it would change the outcome of the game, but definitely would have been more competitive. But that was a very low scoring game for me. Well, I mean, I scored 41 points, but still, like, I was on my back foot that entire game because I couldn't sacrifice. I lost too many units every time I tried to sacrifice. If I gave up a devilfish, it'd be a devilfish and the contents inside. The Riptide was gone. The broadsides were gone. I was essentially tabled at the end of the game. So the kind of and kudos to my opponent as well. I mean, he played it really well. I don't want to take anything from him, but it was a matchup as well that I think I would have had to play perfect, and he would have had to make a mistake for me to pull that off, and that's okay. You have those matchups. It was the third game. I made some mental mistakes because I wasn't in shape. The list isn't fine-tuned for the meta right now because it changed since I designed it, and I wasn't ready to give up on it, to be honest with you.
All right, well, you mentioned your list wasn't fine-tuned, so let's circle back to that list building. Now that you've had those 3 sort of semi-competitive or fully competitive games, depending on how you view them. What would you change about your list in the future? Do you have any of those mainstay units that we see in the competitive field? Would you prefer to bring those in? Speaking specifically for crisis suits or the super puncher enforcer commander that we see in the mid board a bit.
Yeah, so I bring the super puncher in a cold star because I like the flexibility. It's better on enforcer, but it's harder to deploy right. You have to be perfect with his deployment. How I would adjust my list, I think I would have to rethink it, only because I would either keep playing this list and not really change much, to be honest with you. Not because I think this list is perfect, but because the concept of this list doesn't work when you start pulling things out. So by the time I start changing this list, I think I would switch to, for example, instead of Tau Sept, I'd probably go Borcan and run 3 Storm Surges. Not because I think that's super competitive, but because it'd be really fun to play. That's an option I'm kind of throwing around, because when you play competitively, you don't necessarily have to win every game as much as you want to have a chance at every game, right? You want to go into a tournament, and especially an RTT, which is, like I said, I mean, you're having 13 players, 15 players, 20 players. You can win a tournament with a wonky list. A GT, mostly not. But if your goal is to win half your games, it will still be good. But you can win an RTT with a surprise list, especially something as skewed as 3 Storm Surges or tons of Fire Warriors in Devilfish, things like that. But it will be based on what you run into. And if you run into a hard matchup, then you lose. But it should be a list you have fun with. I would consider a more crisis-heavy army, except they're too fragile. And I don't know where the right balance is, besides some of those lists you see winning. Tau, I think, have already dropped off of winning so many games, just because of some of the better codexes that have come out and people figuring out how to play against Tau. And I think at this point, to play competitively for Tau, you should stick to something you love playing on top of what's good. And that's what makes this codex so good, is that there aren't a lot of bad choices. Some changes, for example, I should consider Vespid for a little bit higher AP. Change the Riptide to a more anti-tank weapon, or bring Long Strike, so I at least have something that can do damage. Like, I look back at the Harlequin game, honestly, a Storm Surge wouldn't be terrible, although I'd only be wounding on 3 ups, because they have a slight form of transhuman, which also hurt me a lot. Being able to make something only wound on a 4 or even a 3 is really tough when I can give +1 to wound to most of my guns. So there's a lot of things that match up poorly for Tau against Harlequins, and sometimes you just lose those games, and I'm okay losing those games. So, not to ramble too much, but I think I'd circle around to, I like this list. I would tweak it slightly, but I'm fine with this list. I would experiment with other lists if I really want to. I'm probably going to go to the Atlantic City Open. I may bring this list, just to be honest with you. So it's better to play a list than a new list that's finer tuned.
Sure, absolutely. I have one final question for you before we move on to our last topic here, and that is, why didn't you bring any Kroot? Why no Kroot, Robby?
That's a great question. Kroot are very point efficient, and I was on the fence with it. So looking over my list, you see that I have 5 troop choices, right? 3 Breachers, 2 Fire Warriors. And the 2 Fire Warriors have one main job, and that is to get me objectives, right? To do actions. I usually brought one of the Tau specific ones. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but it's where you put a marker essentially on halfway through each board edge, and you complete an action, and you get a points equivalent to it. And I took that in every game, and I really like that mission. The problem with Kroot is if you give them the job of doing that same task, they're really easy to kill. And when you play good players, they know what you're doing, so you can't hide what you're doing. So 10 4 up save bodies is a lot more resilient than 10 6 up save bodies. And so letting someone that just happens to have a storm bolter on their rhino or a heavy stubber on their vehicle, those are the shots they throw in to whatever infantry unit is nearby. And fire warriors can take those shots, Kroot cannot. And that's kind of where my head was with this build. Kroot, though, are pretty good. And I think I would use them more in that Storm Surge list where where I would bring enough of them that I don't mind losing a bunch of bodies. But this list likes those strike teams firing, the fire warrior teams called strike teams. I do like them being able to also contribute at 36 inches when I need them. So they play both those roles, whereas Kroot will never really survive to contribute to the game unless you bring 30 of them or 60 of them. And at that point, you're playing a different list.
Very fair. I'll allow it.
I'll ask you next time I build a list to make sure it gets approved.
I've got plenty of them you can borrow if you need to. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to us about your time at Palladium. Next, I want to let you talk about your sort of brainchild that we have going into the summer here. You are kind of spearing the path with the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe Summer League that's coming up here in June. So why don't you talk a little bit about that before we wrap up our interview today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about this. We've run leagues in the past, typically escalation leagues, and we want to do something different. A lot of the local stores run a lot of events for smaller points, as well as escalation league type stuff to really help new players play. But what we really are missing in this area are more 2,000 point events, things that really help players have now built up their collections and now want to start dabbling into maybe competitive play or even narrative play, but larger games. It's like, how can we as an organization, as a gaming club, really help support those players, both the ones that are hyper competitive and those that are just kind of want to play games for fun? So what we're doing is we're finalizing the details, but we're going to run a league starting in June. It'll be from June to July. It'll be across 2 months where you will be set up in pods. We're thinking those pods will be 6 people total. And you have to play 5 games in those 2 months. You could play anywhere. Your basement, a gaming store. Shoot, if you want to set up a game at a picnic table at a park, I don't care. If that's something you really want to do. As long as you and your partner, of course, who you're playing, agree. But play 5 total games in 2 months with players in your pod. So one for each player, one against each player, to see who wins. The best record wins that pod, and they win the prize. We're finalizing prizes, but we're using this as partly a fundraiser as well. But most of the money, probably like 80 to 90% of the money, will be prize support. So it's probably going to be gift cards. I'm not sure if we can just give away cash. It'd be cash if we can do it, but it may be gift cards as prizes to give to the players who win. There's small pods of 6 players, so that's what will decide the prize support. For cost, we're looking at $20 each player, so you're getting 5 games across 2 months. It's just really exciting to get some practice games. I know we as a club know most players or a lot of the players in this area. So what we're going to try to do is align the pods by experience and faction. So we haven't finalized the formula, but if you're a hyper competitive player and you're playing a very competitive army, we'll put you in a top pod with others who are very competitive and have a highly competitive army. Now, if you, for example, are a newer player, but you're playing Harlequins, you may be rated a little higher than a newer player playing Necrons, for example. However, we'll still keep you in a pod that makes sense for your skill level. So we'll do that for this um, pod, but we're going to do this a couple times a year. So our goal is to do 3 a year. We're going to start off with 2 this year. Based on your rankings and performance, you will move up and down pods based on your ranking. That way, the pods continue to be adjusted based on your ability, and you continue to compete with players that are closer to your skill set. We're really excited about this and really hope that a lot of you listening do get engaged in it and involved. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to make sure that this event is a success, because this is really what we want to do in this area, is help give more opportunity for players like you to continue to strengthen your gaming skills while getting to know a lot of the great players in the Lehigh Valley area.
Awesome. Sounds like we've got a very exciting summer and possibly fall or winter for that second league coming up.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great time.
All right.
Oh, I should let you know, if you are interested in joining the league, email us at GEF, so Gamers of Eastern Fringe, it's GEF streaming at gmail.com. We'll put the email, hopefully, if you can, in the description. Email us, let us know you're interested, or message us on Facebook or on our Discord. Either myself directly, Robby Vega, or Matt, or any of us on here that you see as an admin. Let us know that you're interested. We're collecting emails and names, and we'll get you started. Super excited for it. It's starting in June. We'll have the exact date soon, but it'll probably be the first or second week that it'll start.
Awesome. Sounds like we've got a very, very spectacular summer coming up for us. Well, I just want to thank you again, Robby, for sitting down with me this evening and talking about your experience and for talking about our event coming up later this summer. I really appreciate it, and I think everybody listening at home also had some appreciation for your words of wisdom as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again, Robby, for giving us that interview and for setting up our summer league as well. Coming up, it looks like we also
Absolutely.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was adding something midstream. Go figure. One of the other things in the area, guys, in case you're looking for something else to do in the upcoming scene, a little preview for you. We do have the Berks Spring Assault 2022. That's going to be on April the 23rd. Now, that is part of the Berks PA gaming group, so we are not so competitive as a gaming group that we won't advertise somebody else's event. But they are having this again on April 23rd at the Conrad Weiser Middle School. And so if you are interested in that, they do have a very active Facebook group, Berks PA Gaming Club, and you can check them out to get information about this event. But they are really doing some good things out there and do host some very regular events and tournaments. So it's a pretty big event they're doing, and they're very happy to have it back now that things, as Matt had said just a little while ago, are really turning around in terms of the pandemic and various restrictions on events that we've been seeing.
Right, looks like we got a pretty good roster of local events there, so we're excited to see everybody out at those events. And again, just a gentle reminder, I know you just heard our interview about it and our announcement earlier, we are looking forward to our Gamers of the Eastern Fringe Summer League just here in a few months, so kind of plan those lists up and be ready to throw down.
Absolutely, folks. It's. I mean, if you didn't hear it already from our hobby section about keeping the hobby fun, part of keeping the hobby fun for some of us is rolling those dice. We may not get our kicks out of painting, but we get our kicks out of having a painted model on the table that's wrecking our opponents. So, get to work on it, dream up some crazy lists, and get to it. Which, oddly enough, is a fantastic transition. Totally unintended there, of course. Part of our next segment is about a list analysis. So, listeners, if you would like us to review a really thin, this is the section where we would do just that. We were a little sparse on responses this time around, so we do have a list right now from Rob Brown. He has a Tau list for us, and for listeners that are kind of scratching their heads, like, wait a second, I thought that's actually my brother. This is again a guy I know very very well in terms of how he plays and what he likes to do with his hobby. Since I am the one that often paints up his stuff. But he has his Tau list for us, and I have a Tau expert with me with Matt. So while I know how this will be played, Matt knows what would be more efficient than not. So we're going to go through Rob's Tau list, give you the full breakdown of it, and then we're just going to do some fun analysis, our hot takes on this list. So Rob has a battalion detachment. He has picked a Farsight Enclave's Allied World as his sept. And then he has, for HQs, he has a Cadre Fireblade, and he has the Through Unity Devastation Warlord trait, and he's bought in the Lantern as one of his relics, and he's given it the Promising Pupil stratagem. He also has a Commander in Cold Star Battlesuit, helping out, giving him that Commander ability to help do all those fun Art of War things. So he's got Master of the Killing Blow on that. He's got a Fusion Blaster, 2 of those actually, a high output burst cannon, the Gauntlet that absolutely donkey punches everybody, a shield gen, stim injectors, and he's made that his Warlord. He has, in his troop spots, 3 identical strike teams. Actually, not identical. They have some points differences. But 3 strike teams, more or less the same. Some of them include a marker drone. Some include a shield generator. But more or less identical in how they function. It's just a question of points and drones he wants in those. In the elite slots, he has, probably to nobody's surprise, 3 Crisis Suit Battlesuit units. These are each slightly different. He actually has 2 that are identical, so that would be, he has a 2 battle suits with double burst cannons, plasma rifle, and shield generators, and then the sergeant equivalent, burst cannon, the iridium battle suit for that extra save, plasma rifle, and shield gen, and those 2 squads are each rocking 2 marker drones. The last squad is just 2 battle suits, and it would include burst cannon, plasma rifle, shield gen for both the main and sergeant equivalent there, with 2 marker drones as well. And I'm going to let Matt finish the list on up so we have a change in voice. Matt, you want to take it from the fast attack slot forward?
Yes, absolutely. So in the fast attack slot, it looks like we do have 2 identical units of Pathfinders clocking in at 115 points each. Both of these units are coming in with a pulse accelerator drone and 3 special weapons. Looks like we've got the grenade launcher on one Pathfinder and the rail rifle on the other 2 special weapons units. Deadly weapons there for sure. Sliding into our heavy support slot, we've got a unit of 2 broadside battle suits, both with the rail rifles and smart missile systems, accompanied by, of course, a pair of marker drones, and then 2 identical Hammerhead gunships. We've got the railgun on there, devastating, 2 seeker missiles, and 2 gun drones as the support spawns in there. And rounding out the list are 2 identical Devilfish, each with smart missile systems instead of gun drones, and seeker missiles on there.
So that's a list. So Matt, I figure let's turn to you because you play Tau, so as someone who also knows this faction pretty well and has been excited by the changes to its codex in 9th edition. What do you get from Rob's list?
I like a lot of what's here. I think personally that it might operate better as not a Farsight Enclave's allied list. You don't have a lot of units here that want to be up in their opponent's faces, save for the crisis suits, of course. But you tend to take the Farsight Enclaves for their ability to take 2 commanders in a list instead of just 1. And you want to take a Farsight Enclave's allied world because you can take those 2 commanders and also take an ethereal, I believe, or it might just be 1 commander and an ethereal, but you get all the benefits from being Farsight Enclaves and those benefits for being closer to your opponent. So
yeah, Matt, I agree. I know that was the whole reason for the Farsight Enclave thing, and I want to say either there's been active talks or they did drop a. I think they did in the most recent FAQ for Tau. They actually did clear up that loophole that even a Farsight allied world wouldn't allow an ethereal to govern them. So I think they did fix that loophole where, it's Farsight. They don't like ethereals because of the lore. So I did think they fixed that. So I think we wouldn't see an ethereal in this list per the new FAQ that dropped. But, or errata. My apologies, listeners. And yeah, I would agree. It is odd to see a Farsight list without two commanders because it looks more akin to another Sept list since it only carries the one.
Yeah. I mean, I like what I see here a lot, and I'm by no means a competitive mastermind. My one big take is there are a lot of marker lights in this list. Just from marker drones alone, I believe I counted 15 or 16 throughout the list. Just marker drones, not even sources of marker light. And because you have two Pathfinder teams and your Cadre Fireblade has the Lantern Relic, I don't think that all of those marker drones are necessary. If you take all of those marker drones out, you end up being able to afford an additional Pathfinder team, which gives you more marker lights, but it also gives you access to the killing power of those rail rifles. If you shed some points other places as well, between taking out all of those marker drones and swapping the smart missiles on the Devilfish for the gun drones, which are a free upgrade, you would be able to take that second commander, I believe, if I'm doing the math fast enough in my head. So you would have...
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Instead of all of those gun drones, you'd have the killing power of a second commander, which is the whole reason you take Farsight Enclaves in the first place. You might be able to take that, swap some weapons around here and there, and you might be able to take that Enforcer commander that's been dominating the midboard with the Relic Flamer that you can use in the fight phase and the Onager Gauntlet. And they're just super durable beat sticks that no one can get rid of because you have those Crisis Bodyguard units right next to them.
Absolutely. And as Matt and I were kind of reviewing this list in advance of recording the show, we that was our common take, was exactly as he said. Just it's when you do the math on the sheer number of marker lights that can come out of this thing, even assuming half of them don't land, I'm not sure we have enough instances of shooting that would utilize all of them. And of course, every good list has redundancy, but that's our only kind of common thought between the two of us was it's a lot of marker lights, and are you going to use them all? So maybe that's part of this particular Tau pilot's thought. Maybe my brother is really thinking he's gonna marker light some stuff off and just really lay on layers and just peel his opponent back like an onion, layer by layer. But yeah.
And that could very well be a mentality left over from the way marker lights used to work in 8th edition, where instead of it being you have a marker light, you have +1 to hit, you have to stack up to 5 marker lights on a target to get that +1 to hit. So that I remember when I started building through the new codex, that was kind of something that I had to consciously make a change about, because it's not, I have 16 marker lights that might only hit on 4s, and then I have to hope that out of those 16 marker lights, more than 50% of them land on that target so that I can get that +1 to hit on key units. Now all of your marker lights, it's an action that goes off successfully on a 3, and you just get +1 to hit and consume that marker token. So you can kind of, at least personally, be a little bit more reserved with how many marker lights you take and spend those points on other killy units, whether it's, as we said earlier, the second commander that you have access to, or even a squad of stealth suits, just to get kind of the turn 1 deep strike ability from the stealth suits with one of these crisis suit teams. There's a lot of different paths you could take if you shed those marker lights out. Another thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Ricky,
Matt.
go ahead.
No, you got it. You got it. I want to hear this other thing you got in mind because, again, you're the Tau expert among us. Go ahead.
Well, Ricky, you mentioned earlier that you had been painting breachers, which I think is going to be a correction to what I'm going to say. But if you're using Farsight enclaves, your Fire Warriors might be able to sit back and hold your objectives for you, but breachers are definitely a lot more effective in a Farsight enclave. I know. Personally, I like to stick 3 squads of 10 in Devilfish and get them as far across the table as I possibly can, and make sure that they are getting that turn 1 shooting right into my opponent's face. So that's something to consider going forward, is swapping these strike teams out for breachers. If you shed the marker lights, then you've got a third Pathfinder team to sit back on your objectives while your breachers go do the dirty work, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And he has the Devilfish built in that obviously it's clearly kind of communicating. He can rush these up and use that stratagem to, have the Devilfish move, get the team out, and still allow them to shoot to full effect, which is obviously all the more punishing if you have a breacher team that gets within that sweet spot in their range where their weapons are even deadlier than they are at their maximum range. I do have a story for our listeners as to why this list is the way that it is, and this obviously won't be the case for everybody who submits a list, but feel free to give us some history. We love a good story. That's kind of what makes the hobby fun. I kind of know why my brother has brought a Cadre Fireblight and 3 strike teams. These have been a fantastic return for him whenever he's fielded them, so I think some of it is just muscle memory, as it were. As Matt, you'll appreciate this as a Tau player. I decided to try and rush his. This is 8th edition. We're going back a little bit, but I had a kitted out battle wagon, which was most likely a bone breaker from the way I remember it, that charged his lines that had a cadre and 3 strike teams, and the Overwatch alone killed and made the battle wagon explode.
Those were the days.
And it wasn't marker lighted. He didn't have any buffs on it. He just overwatched it to death. And, my troops that were inside, such as they were just sitting out in the wind, and they died the very next phase because they couldn't do anything. So it was a brutal Overwatch. And so, I have, as the hobbyist for the 2 of us, I have kitted out some orc skulls on the base of his Cadre Fireblade in honor of some of these past histories, which again, folks, do that, have some fun with it. If you've had some models that do some wild things, go for it. Back to his list, though, the only other thing I would just bring up is it's got a lot of rail rifles, which is great. That they're kind of a great strength in the Tau Codex right now. I mean, obviously the entire world was on fire when GW unveiled the Hammerhead gunship's primary gun with the railgun and what it can do. And everybody thought the sky was going to fall because it could bypass an invul save, which personally I don't mind because, when you can get your invul up to a 3+, playing as a faction that doesn't have many invul options at all, I really don't weep many tears when you can't save on a 3-up. So Adeptus Custodes players looking at you. But, So I know he has seen a good return for his railguns. So if that works, then you can strategically play them with broadsides and hammerheads. Obviously, the hammerheads have a great bit more of movement options to reposition and find new targets than the broadsides. But obviously, with the different abilities from the commander to be able to allow movement and advancing without losing out any of your shooting, he certainly has a good option there.
Oh, no doubt. That commander is kitted out very well. I think the competitive option is going to be that Enforcer battlesuit, but I like the way that commander looks. It's kind of an all-comers sort of look. It definitely it pays the bills, as it were. Absolutely.
And listeners, we forgot to say it in the list breakdown, but this list does clock in at 104 power level for those that play that. 10 CP. He spent some pre-game stratagems, and it clocks in at 1,999 points. So for those that that cringe at the thought of it not being a perfect 2,000 point list, we are sorry, but that's where it landed. And that is Rob Brown's Tau list. And so, Rob, if you're listening, we hope you enjoyed our little critique. Matt, am I missing out on any final comments for Rob?
No, I think it looks good. The only thing I'll say again is play more to kind of the units that you have with the sept that you chose. If you're going Farsight Enclaves, don't be afraid to get up in there and throw hands. But if with the list that you have, consider Tau Sept or Borkon, because you've got a lot of long range that can reach out and poke people from pretty far away. So you don't need to necessarily worry about that rerolls benefits that you get when you're within 12 inches.
Nice. All right, listeners. Well, the next thing we have is actually interacting with you some more. So that was our list review. Now we have some listener questions, though today it's singular. We have a listener question. And this comes to us from Chris Kunkel. So Chris wrote in asking honest thoughts on the new League of Votann and their place in the meta. For those wondering what I just said, what's the League of Votann? And we're hoping we pronounced that right, and I'm sure we'll be corrected later. But this is GW had previewed on April Fool's Day, April the 1st, showing a excellent looking trailer that could have revealed any number of factions. It was really all purpose. And then, of course, if you haven't seen at the end, there was a little teaser of a faction that has kind of been a meme to ask, will it return, will it return? And that, of course, is squats. So did you get a chance to watch that, Matt? What did you think of it?
I did. I thought the placement of it being April Fool's Day, personally, was a little too perfect. There was a couple group chats that I was in that I think the joke was that it was going to be a double bamboozle, that the next day, oh, they're going to come back later this week and say, just kidding, the squats are back, the squats are back, the squats are back. And lo and behold, the very next day, another teaser trailer drops, and we get to see our very first squat model since before I was born.
Absolutely, and that's exactly how far this harkens back to. So for veterans in this hobby that have been this for 30 years, they just released today, actually, the day we're recording on April the 5th, the most recent Warhammer community article is actually talking about the saga of the squats from their inception in the first edition of Warhammer 40k, then known as Rogue Trader. These were the first models. They were the Space Dwarves. They were the squats later on. And so it kind of takes you through the history, including some of the artwork, the early models, and especially how they functioned in the epic style games where everything was, believe it or not, 6mm. So, vehicles that normally for us today would be quite chunky were these tiny little things, and very much metal. So it was kind of neat to read through that article today, just as someone who really hasn't been yearning for the squats to return because I didn't know what they were. This is, as you may have heard in the pilot, I entered in late 7th edition, so I wasn't particularly looking. Squats were not on my radar, folks. They were, they were a fun meme about resetting the clock every time they got mentioned, but I did not expect this come April Fool's Day. And as Matt just said, a great double bamboozle because, they teased it and everyone was kind of ready for it to just to end there. And then when they came back with the model, and again, if you haven't seen it, please, we're going to include the Warhammer community article about the saga of the squats. And if you follow that, you can, of course, get access to the other articles and see this model that has been revealed by GW. So Chris wants to know, again, honest thoughts on this new League of Votann. So I'll turn it over to you, Matt. What do you think about this?
What do I think? I mean, it's hard to say, honestly. We've seen a model with endless speculation about what the weapon could be, what the stat block of the model will look like, what the army as a whole will look like. We've seen, like we said, exactly one model. We don't know really anything else. I've heard people say that they think that the league is going to play similarly to how Space Marines should play. I'm not exactly sure what that means. It's just a comment that I've seen floating around a little bit. I've seen pictures comparing weapons from the Tau, the ion rifle that Pathfinders have access to. The end of the barrel looks very similar to a part of the weapon that the squat is holding in that picture. Someone is speculating that they might be a Tau allied faction instead of an Imperium allied faction. We really don't know.
So, and that was my comment. Sadly, Chris, I don't think we can. There's not enough honesty in us to say how it'll work in the meta because we don't know. We don't have those stats. As Matt just said, we can speculate. We can begin to follow the rumor mill about what they could do. I do have one hot take on this, and that's again as someone who plays orcs and who's fielded his fair number of grots across many games in 8th edition and in 9th. If these are short models, meaning they are not very tall, we're not talking Primaris Space Marine, 32 millimeter, good sized chunky models. If these are tiny, tactically, I think it's going to be great for generals who are good at kind of positioning things where you can't see them, even if you've done all the terrain shenanigans to say, okay, I'm beyond this, I'm not in obscuring, but I still can't see that model. I think that'll be pretty cool because we've been seeing more and more of our factions get drawn up to a larger size, which I'm not opposed to. I, for one, think it's a whole lot easier to paint some of our more modern orc boys in that case versus the kind of short and stumpy ones that have been the mainstay of orc horde armies for editions on editions now. But, as someone who can put grots behind a wall, and I know my opponent has no shot of seeing them unless they come all the way around behind me. I really look forward to seeing what the league will be able to do depending upon the size of models. And obviously they're known even in the article that was referenced as having, exosuits, and they'll most likely have various vehicles and transports and things like so. I'm not anticipating the whole range will be easy to hide, but it's just a cool thought to think, there will be a faction in this game of ours that will be in the opposite direction of getting bigger.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say while we're on the topic of their size, I think that you can sort of speculate that they will be at least the same size as a guardsman. I would say probably shorter than a guardsman. I think it would be unfortunate if they were bigger than a guardsman, but time will tell, I suppose. We haven't had any evidence as to how big that model is. You can't tell if it's a 32 millimeter base or a 25 millimeter base. We just don't know.
Oh, agreed. I think it would be very ironic if the League of Votan and the kin, as they call themselves according to the article, are taller than a standard human. Like, it would go against the whole notion of they're short, they're space dwarves, they're squats, but they're taller than your average, heading towards 6 foot tall according to some of the various charts and lore, about standardized guardsmen. Like, it'd be really odd. Like, oh, they're taller than 6 feet, but they're short somehow. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But needless to say, Matt and I and many others are going to be following up on this and eager to see what comes out about this faction. And Matt, you had heard a pretty interesting thought as we were talking in the pre-show that, especially lore-wise, these may not be allied with the Imperium, and there's thoughts that they wouldn't fold into the standard definition of Chaos or Xenos either, so we might have an interesting rogue faction.
Yeah, I remember reading, and I might be remembering incorrectly, in the initial reveal article for the model, something about them making technological advances that the Imperium might consider heretical, and it mentioned a lot about no love lost between the squats and the Imperium. It'll be interesting to see how they fit into the lore after being swallowed by the warp, for lack of a better term, for the better part of 2 decades, 3 decades now.
Exactly. So it will be interesting to see where they fall, if they just get folded into the super faction of the Imperium, or if they stand out, and if they don't fall into the other categories, it'll be exciting to have a faction that, exists kind of outside of the kind of main three, super factions that exist with Imperium, Chaos, and Xenos. So we'll see. But Chris, thank you for writing in for your question. I hope, please let us know if there's any follow up you'd like. And again, listeners, if you would like us to talk over your question or comment in our episodes, please look for the Facebook post or Discord question in either of those platforms, and we will add those to our notes and happily discuss it. Speaking of discussing things, we're starting to head towards our wrap up, folks. It's been a good long episode, and we're glad you stuck with us. So a couple of closing comments. So I do have one before I even turn it over to Matt. So Matt, you said earlier in the show you would have pegged me as the more brutal and not cutting war boss.
Yes.
Curious about that. What gave it away?
What gave it away? It's the opposite of how you present yourself. You're very calm, very collected. I think when the dice start to roll, it all goes away, and you just become absolutely unhinged, and fly into a very well-designed orky rage and barrel forward.
I mean, I'll absolutely admit that does happen. I do have my Incredible Hulk moment where it just goes, and it's like, yeah, we're just going to smash things. It's good. Let's go get them. But yeah, there's also, 9th edition definitely gave me pause to say, okay, let me get a bit more tactical. And most folks, when they hear you're an orc player, expect you to do just that. They expect you to charge every time you're within 12 inches. And that's actually, not to give my opponents a little heads up, but that's typically how I won't play, because especially as I build this Army of Renown, this speed freak speed mob list, I'm thinking about like, oh yeah, I'll advance some war bikes, get them onto an objective, be in, half range for DACA weapons to get the extra shots, blast something, and then keep them there, because now I'm an OBSEC unit. You have to come get me off, and the entirety of that unit might cost 120 points. So even if you kill it, I'm like, oh, that was a great trade. I'm sitting on an objective. You didn't score your points. Congrats. And just playing, like I said, off that opposite thing. Like, they're going to expect one thing. I'm going to do the opposite. Go for my, grand strategy. But yeah, I like the idea of that. And Matt, I generally have no idea. I'm like, well, he presents himself very organized, which means I'm like, ooh, those lists are probably like airtight, points efficient.
No. Not even a little bit.
So I guess we're both off about each other, and it's just going to be a great time when we play the first match, because both of us are going to be planning for a strategy that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. I have been told that I am too aggressive. Everybody that I ask advice from has told me that I am too aggressive and I need to play a little bit more reserved. So it sounds like we're just going to clash in the mid-board, and the game will be over by the end of turn 3.
That does make for faster games and more games as a result, so that's great. Well, all right, folks. Matt, any other closing comments from you as we wrap up episode 1?
No, I've got nothing left in the tank here. I've said everything that I needed to say.
Indeed. So, well, listeners, again, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode 1, our first full-length one, Into the Fray. And as a reminder, please, if you have not done so already, join our Facebook group, our Discord server. Both of those are named Gamers of the Eastern Fringe. You can also find links and access to them. If you do find one or the other, you'll be able to track down the other one without much difficulty. This is a chance and a platform where you can chat with us or any other members of the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe network and your fellow hobbyists. If you've not done so already, we really would appreciate, as we grow this new podcast, please do consider leaving a 5-star review. It's going to help us to reach a wider audience because of all the beautiful algorithm things. And if you do enjoy the content, it just lets us know that you enjoy it. So that 5-star review says, hey, somebody out there likes what we're doing. Lastly, please do the typical things like share, subscribe. Again, all algorithm good things that help us grow and reach more folks. So folks, without further ado, again, all the best to you, and please do keep enjoying your hobby.
All right, have a great morning, day, or night, everybody.